Commander Lee Taeho woke up slowly. His head felt like someone had hit it with a hammer. The taste of blood filled his mouth. He tried to move, but his hands were locked behind his back with heavy metal rings. Everything was wrong. The air smelled strange. The walls around him were not made of anything he knew. They were dark and curved in ways that made his eyes hurt. Blue lights moved along the ceiling like living things. Taeho remembered what happened. His ship, the ESS Explorer, had been flying through empty space near a distant star. They were looking for new worlds that humans could live on someday. Then enemy ships appeared from nowhere. The attack was fast and brutal. His crew had fought hard. Engineer Park Minna kept the shields working as long as she could. Weapons Officer Kim Jin-woo fired back until the guns were destroyed. Communications. Officer Choi Dae-sung sent distress signals right up to the end. They were all dead now. Taeho had watched them die before everything went black. He rolled over on the cold metal floor. His ribs hurt badly. At least 3 were broken. His blue uniform was torn and covered with dried blood. Some was his own blood. Some belonged to his friends. Heavy footsteps echoed outside his prison. Metal doors opened with loud sounds. 3 tall figures walked into the room. They were not human. These creatures stood much taller than any person Taeho had ever seen. Their skin was blue like deep ocean water but rough like tree bark. They wore armor made from bones and metal plates. Long weapons hung from their belts. The biggest one looked down at Taeho with bright yellow eyes. When it spoke, the words sounded like growling and clicking. But somehow Taeho could understand every word. There had to be a translation machine nearby. "The soft creature is awake," the alien said. Its voice was deep and full of meanness. "I am War Chief Gultak of the Vorthak Empire. You belong to me now, human." Taeho stayed quiet. His training at the military academy had taught him what to do if captured. Give only your name, rank, and number. Tell the enemy nothing else. Gultak made a sound like rocks grinding together. It was laughing. "You think staying quiet will help you? Your people know nothing about real war. We watched your weak ship try to run away from us. Your weapons could not even scratch our hull." Though, Alien reached down and grabbed Taeho by his torn shirt. With one hand, Gultak lifted him completely off the ground. The creature was incredibly strong. Taeho felt helpless in its grip. "Look at yourself," Gultak said, holding Taeho up to eye level. "Your skin tears so easy. Your bones break with little force. You have no claws, no armor, no real strength. How did such weak things ever learn to fly between the stars?" Another alien stepped forward. This one was smaller but still scary. It wore long robes covered with symbols that seemed to move when Taeho was not looking directly at them. "War Chief, maybe we should ask the creature about human war machines." Gultak dropped Taeho back to the floor. The human hit hard, sending new pain through his broken ribs. "What war machines, Kathira? We destroyed their ship in minutes. Their weapons are toys. Their armor is like paper." The robed alien, Kathira, tilted her head like a curious bird. "Still, they did learn to travel in space. They must know something useful." "Nonsense." Gultak waved his massive hand. "Humans are just lucky. They probably found some old technology they do not understand, like children playing with tools too dangerous for them." Taeho forced himself to sit up straighter despite the pain. These aliens thought humans were weak and stupid. Good. Let them think that. When your enemy thinks you are weak, they make mistakes. The third alien had not spoken yet. This one looked younger than the others. His skin had fewer scars. His armor was simpler with fewer decorations. He watched Taeho with what might have been interest instead of hatred. "War Chief," the young alien said carefully, "what should we do with the prisoner?" Gultak's yellow eyes lit up with cruel joy. "Do with him? This is not about orders, Gorak. This is about fun. The human will provide entertainment for our warriors when we reach Kronar Prime." Kathira nodded with approval. "The sacred guardians have not eaten in a long time. They are getting restless in their cages." Teho did not like how that sounded. Sacred guardians could mean anything. But when aliens used words like sacred and guardians together, it usually meant something big, hungry, and very dangerous. "What are these sacred guardians?" he asked, breaking his silence. If he was going to die, he wanted to know how. Gultak laughed again. "The human speaks. It wants to know about the Drakmar." "How funny." "The Drakmar are the ancient ones," Kathira said with the voice of someone talking about gods. "Great beasts from a world that no longer exists. They are bigger than your ships. Their scales are harder than our strongest metals. They breathe fire that can melt stone. Their teeth are like giant swords. They are the greatest test of warrior courage," Gultak added. "For 1,000 years our best fighters have faced them in single combat. Most die in seconds. The lucky ones die fast." Teho felt cold fear in his stomach. They were talking about dragons. Real dragons. And they planned to throw him to these monsters for fun. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because fear makes the show better," Gultak replied. "When you cry and beg for mercy in front of the Drakmar, our warriors will laugh harder." The young alien Gorak looked uncomfortable. "War Chief, is it right to use a thinking being just for entertainment? The human may be weak, but he fought bravely." Gultak's face grew angry. "Do not question me, young one. The human is a prize from battle, nothing more. His people came into our space. They must learn what happens when they do that." Teho wanted to say that the ESS Explorer had been on a peaceful mission. They were explorers, not invaders. But he stayed quiet. These aliens saw any human in space as an enemy. There was no point in arguing. "When do we reach this Kronar Prime?" he asked instead. "Eager to die, human?" Gultak mocked. "We will arrive in 3 of your days. Use the time well. Pray to whatever weak gods your kind worships. It will not save you, but it might make you feel better." The 3 aliens turned to leave. As they reached the door, Teho called out one more question. "What happens if I survive your sacred guardians?" Gultak stopped and looked back. For just a moment, something like surprise showed in his yellow eyes. Then he laughed louder than before. "Survive the Drakmar? Impossible. But if by some miracle you lived, then maybe we would think differently about human strength." "But do not hope for such things," Kathira added. "The sacred guardians have never been beaten. They are perfect killers, made by powers we do not understand." The aliens left. The door closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Teho was alone again in his strange prison. He lay back on the cold floor and looked up at the moving blue lights. 3 days to live. 3 days to figure out how to survive creatures that sounded like monsters from old Earth stories. Dragons. He was going to fight real dragons. Even with everything that had happened, Teho found himself smiling. If he was going to die, at least, it would be a death worth remembering. His crew had died fighting. He would do the same. But first he would try very hard not to die at all. 3 days passed like a bad dream. Teho sat in his prison cell, thinking and planning. The aliens brought him food that tasted like metal and water that smelled wrong. But he ate and drank because he needed strength for what was coming. The 3rd day, the ship stopped moving. Through a small window in his cell, Teho could see a huge planet covered in red rocks and deep valleys. This was Kronar Prime, the ceremonial world of the Vorthak Empire. War Chief Gultak came for him with 6 armed guards. They put new chains on his hands and feet. The chains were heavy, but Teho could still walk. They wanted him to move on his own to make the show better. "Today you die, human," Gultak said with his grinding laugh. "Thousands of warriors have come to watch. You will make them very happy." They dragged Teho through long corridors filled with blue-skinned aliens. All of them stared at him with yellow eyes full of hatred and amusement. Some pointed and made clicking sounds that must have been jokes about how he would die. Finally, they reached a massive underground arena carved from living rock. It was bigger than any stadium on Earth. Thousands of Vorthak warriors filled the seats, all cheering and shouting. The noise was like thunder that never stopped. Teho was pushed onto the arena floor. The ground was covered with sand that had been stained dark brown with old blood. Many creatures had died here over the centuries. High, above in a special box, he could see the most important Vorthak leaders. War Chief Gultak sat next to an ancient alien covered in scars. This had to be High Patriarch Morgak, the ruler of the Empire. Next to them sat Kathira in her symbol-covered robes. People of the Vorthak Empire. Gultak's voice boomed through the arena. Today we have special entertainment. This human dared to enter our sacred space. Now he will face the sacred guardians as punishment for his people's boldness. The crowd roared with approval. They stamped their feet and waved weapons in the air. Taiho had never felt so alone. Kathira stood up and raised her arms. The crowd became quiet. The Drakmar have guarded our empire for 1,000 years, she called out. They are the children of the ancient gods. No outsider has ever survived facing them. Today will be no different. Taiho looked around the arena. The walls were covered with old carvings and symbols. Some of them looked familiar somehow, like star maps he had studied at the academy. But that was impossible. These aliens had never been to Earth. Guards brought him simple weapons and armor. A metal sword that felt heavy in his hands. A shield, made from some kind of animal hide. Chest armor that was too big for him. It was all designed to make the fight last longer, not to actually protect him. Why do you give me weapons if the outcome is already decided? Taiho asked one of the guards. The guard laughed. The Drakmar like to play with their food. If you had no weapons, they would kill you too quickly. This way you will run and fight and scream for a while. It is more fun to watch. Massive gates at the far end of the arena began to open. They moved slowly with the sound of grinding stone. Darkness waited beyond them. The crowd fell silent with anticipation. 3 pairs of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. Then came the sound of huge claws scraping against stone. Something enormous was moving toward the arena floor. Taiho gripped his sword tighter. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. Something strange was happening inside his mind. He felt like he was remembering something important, but he could not quite grasp what it was. The first creature emerged from the gate. It was massive beyond anything Taiho had imagined. The beast stood as tall as a 3-story building. Its body was covered in scales that looked like blue crystal. It had 4 legs, each ending in claws longer than sword blades. Wings folded against its back could have covered a small ship. But the most striking thing was its head, or rather, heads. This creature had 7 of them, all attached to long necks that moved like snakes. Each head had eyes that glowed like fire and a mouth full of teeth like daggers. 2 more creatures followed the first one out of the gate. They were smaller but still enormous. One had 3 heads and wings that sparkled with silver scales. The other had 2 heads and armor like scales the color of deep gold. These were the Drakmar, the sacred guardians. Dragons. The crowd began cheering again, but their voices sounded distant to Taiho. All he could focus on were the 3 magnificent beasts walking toward him. They moved with grace despite their size. Their eyes never left him. The largest dragon, the one with 7 heads, stopped about 20 meters away. All 7 heads turned to study Taiho from different angles. He could feel intelligence behind those glowing eyes. These were not simple animals. They were thinking, feeling beings. Taiho dropped his sword. The metal blade hit the sand with a soft sound that somehow carried through the entire silent arena. "I will not fight you," he said quietly, knowing somehow that the dragons could understand him. The 7-headed dragon tilted all its heads at once, like a curious cat. The other 2 dragons moved to flank it, but they did not attack. They just watched and waited. High above, War Chief Gultak was shouting something, but Taiho could not hear the words. Everything else had faded away. There was only him and the Abraju, 3 dragons in a bubble of perfect silence. The largest dragon lowered one of its heads until it was level with Taiho's eyes. They stared at each other across 5 meters of blood-stained sand. The dragon's breath smelled like cinnamon and starlight. Then something impossible happened. Images began flashing through Taiho's mind. Not his own memories, but something older and deeper. He saw cities among the stars built from crystal and light. He saw beings that looked almost human but were somehow more. He saw great ships crossing the galaxy, carrying life to empty worlds. And he saw dragons, thousands of them, flying through space without ships, their crystal scales reflecting the light of 1 billion stars. The vision ended as suddenly as it began. Tahoe gasped and staggered backward. The dragon was still watching him with those ancient, intelligent eyes. In the stands, someone screamed. Then another voice joined it, and another. The crowd was no longer cheering. They were afraid, because the 3 dragons had done something no one expected, something that had never happened before. In 1,000 years of arena combat, they bowed their heads to the human. The arena fell completely silent. 10,000 Vorthak warriors sat frozen in their seats, unable to believe what they were seeing. The sacred guardians, the Drakmar who had killed hundreds of champions over the centuries, were bowing to a human. Tahoe stared at the 3 massive creatures in shock. The largest dragon, with its 7 heads, had lowered all of them until they almost touched the sand. The other 2 dragons had done the same. It looked like they were showing respect, maybe even worship. "This is impossible," War Chief Gultak shouted from his high seat. His voice cracked with disbelief. "The Drakmar bow to no one except the ancient gods." Kathira had gone pale, her blue skin turning almost white. She was reading from a scroll, with shaking hands. "The prophecies," she whispered, but her voice carried in the silent arena. "The old texts speak of this. When the seed-bearers return, the sacred guardians will know them." High Patriarch Morgak stood up slowly. He was very old even for a Vorthak, and his movements were careful. "What are you saying, priestess?" "The forbidden scrolls, my lord, the ones we found in the ruins on Zerion Prime. They tell of an ancient race that seeded life across the galaxy. The texts call them the Seed-Bearers. They created the Drakmar as guardians and companions." Tahoe barely heard their conversation. All his attention was focused on the dragon in front of him. The largest head was still level with his eyes. As he watched, the creature's mouth opened slightly. No fire came out. Instead, Tahoe heard something that sounded almost like words, but not spoken out loud. The words formed directly in his mind. "Child of the Star Walkers," the voice said. It was ancient and deep, like the sound of planets turning. "We have waited so long for you to return." "I don't understand," Tahoe thought back, not knowing if the dragon could hear him. "You carry the mark of the Makers," another voice said. This one came from the 3-headed dragon. "Your blood sings with the song of creation." More images flooded Tahoe's mind. He saw the same crystal cities as before, but now he could see the beings who lived there more clearly. They looked human, but taller and more graceful. Their eyes held the light of stars. These beings worked alongside dragons, not as masters, and pets, but as partners and friends. "Your people built ships that could cross between galaxies," the 3rd dragon spoke. Its voice was younger than the others. "You planted seeds of life on 1 million worlds. You gave birth to countless species." "That's not possible," Tahoe said out loud. "Humans are from Earth. We've only had space travel for a few hundred years." The 7-headed dragon lifted one head higher. "Earth is not your birth world, child. It is one of the garden worlds your ancestors created, a place where their children could grow and learn until they were ready to reclaim their heritage." Arena erupted in chaos. Half the Vorthak were shouting that this was impossible. The other half were backing away from the arena floor in terror. Some were even kneeling, as if they thought they were witnessing the return of gods. War Chief Gultak jumped down from his high seat onto the arena floor. He pulled out a massive energy weapon and pointed it at Tahoe. "This is a trick. Some kind of human technology. The Drakmar cannot be fooled by parlor magic." The largest dragon moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. One of its head swung around to face Gultak. The alien's weapon melted in his hands like ice in fire. He screamed and dropped the molten metal. "You will not harm the Maker's child," the dragon said. This time, everyone in the arena could hear its voice. It spoke in the ancient Vorthak language, but somehow Teho understood every word. Kathyra was frantically reading from multiple scrolls now. "The signs are all here," she called out. "The prophecy says that when the true heirs return, the sacred guardians will remember their purpose. They will no longer serve as weapons of war, but as protectors of the ancient wisdom." "You speak of myths and legends," Gultak snarled, cradling his burned hands. "These are just animals we captured from a dead world." "Were they captured?" the dragon asked, turning another head toward the war chief. "Or did we allow ourselves to be brought here because we sensed that one day the children of our makers would find us?" Teho was beginning to understand. The dragons had not been captured at all. They had let the Vorthak take them, knowing that someday humans would expand into space and might need their help. "How long have you been waiting?" he asked. "Time has little meaning to us," the dragon replied. "We are patient. We have waited 60 million of your years since the great silence fell across the galaxy, when the makers left for distant stars and their children forgot who they truly were." 60 million years? Teho could barely process such a vast span of time. "Your ancestors knew they could not stay," the youngest dragon explained. "The galaxy was becoming crowded with new species. Some were peaceful, but others were violent and would have destroyed the garden worlds. So the makers departed, leaving their children to grow up safe and hidden. But they promised to return when the children were ready," the three-headed dragon added, "when they had learned enough to reclaim their inheritance." High Patriarch Morgak had been listening to everything with growing amazement. Now he spoke in a voice full of awe. "If this is true, then we have been keeping gods prisoner for 1,000 years. "Not gods," the largest dragon corrected. "Partners. The makers created us to be companions and helpers, not objects of worship. We are meant to work together, dragon and human, to tend the Garden of Stars." Teho felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. For the first time since his capture, he felt hope. Not just for his own survival, but for something much bigger. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you must choose," the dragon said. "You can return to your people and live a simple life on your garden world, or you can accept your heritage and help us wake the sleeping guardians across the galaxy. There are many of us waiting on many worlds." "And if I choose to accept?" All three dragons raised their heads high. Their scales began to glow with soft light. "Then the real work begins. Child of the Star Walkers. The galaxy is not the peaceful place your ancestors left behind. There are threats growing in the darkness between stars. The garden worlds will need protection." Teho looked around the arena. Thousands of alien faces stared back at him, full of fear, wonder, and confusion. His old life was over. His crew was dead, his ship was destroyed. But maybe something new could begin. He reached out and placed his hand on the warm crystal scales of the dragon's nose. The creature's eyes closed in what might have been happiness. "I accept," Teho said. The dragons began to sing. The song of the dragons filled the arena with sound unlike anything Teho had ever heard. It was not just noise, but something that reached deep into his soul. The crystal scales of all three creatures glowed brighter as their voices joined, together in harmony. Other sounds joined the song from far away. Through the stone walls of the arena, more dragon voices could be heard. Teho realized there were other Drakmar on this world, probably dozens of them, all kept in different locations by the Vorthak. "There are 43 of our kind on this world alone," the largest dragon said, speaking directly into Teho's mind while continuing to sing with its other heads. "They have kept us separated so we could not coordinate an escape. But now that you are here, that is no longer necessary." The arena shook as something massive moved beneath the ground. Cracks appeared in the stone walls. The Vorthak spectators were screaming and running for the exits, but the doors had sealed themselves shut. Ancient technology was activating throughout the facility. High Patriarch Morgak remained in his seat, though his guards were urging him to flee. Kathyra stood beside him with her scrolls spread out, reading frantically. War Chief Gultak lay on the arena floor, staring at his burned hands, in shock. "The facility is built on top of an old maker site," the three-headed dragon explained to Teho. Your people constructed many such places across the galaxy before they departed. Most have been sleeping for millions of years, but your presence is waking them up. Light began streaming up through the cracks in the arena floor. It was not harsh electric light, but something soft and warm like sunlight through leaves. Symbols appeared on the walls glowing with the same gentle radiance. They were clearly not Vorthak writing. "Can you read that?" Teho asked, pointing at the nearest wall. "Not with my eyes," the dragon replied. "But I can feel what it means. It is a welcome message. The site recognizes you as a Maker descendant and is offering its services." More symbols appeared, flowing across the walls like living text. Kathira was trying to copy them down, but they moved too fast for her to follow. "What kind of services?" Teho asked. Before the dragon could answer, a section of the arena floor opened like a flower. A platform rose up from below, carrying something that made Teho's breath catch in his throat. It was clearly technology, but unlike anything humans or Vorthak had ever built. The device was made from the same crystal material as dragon scales, but shaped into flowing curves that seemed to shift and change as he watched. It pulsed with inner light in rhythm with his heartbeat. "A communication array," the youngest dragon said with excitement in its mental voice. "We can use this to contact other Maker sites across the galaxy." Teho approached the device carefully. As he got closer, he could feel a slight tingling in his skin, like standing near a powerful electrical field. But it was not unpleasant. It felt welcoming, even eager. "How do I use it?" "Just touch it," the largest dragon said. "Your genetic code will activate the systems automatically." Teho placed his palm on the smooth crystal surface. The device flared with brilliant light for a moment, then settled into a steady glow. Images began appearing in the air above it, three-dimensional pictures that seemed as real as life. The first image showed Earth from space, but it was not the Earth that Teho knew. This version had different continents and strange cities that floated in the clouds. Ships moved between the planet and its moon, but they were not rockets. They looked like living creatures made of light and metal. "Earth as it was before the Great Departure," the dragon explained. "Your ancestors remade it many times as their needs changed. The version you know is just the most recent." More images followed. Teho saw dozens of worlds, all with human-like beings living alongside dragons and other fantastic creatures. Some of the planets had cities built inside giant trees. Others had floating islands connected by bridges of light. All of them were beautiful beyond imagination. "The garden worlds," the three-headed dragon said. Each one was designed to develop different aspects of Maker culture. Earth specialized in adaptability and survival. Other worlds focused on art, science, philosophy, or harmony with nature. "How many garden worlds are there?" "Originally there were 10,000, the youngest dragon replied. "But many have been destroyed or conquered over the millions of years since the departure. We estimate that fewer than half remain under the protection of their sleeping guardian systems." The images changed to show darker scenes. Teho saw worlds burning under attack from ships he did not recognize. He saw dragon guardians fighting desperately to protect cities full of screaming people. Some of the attackers looked familiar. "Vorthak," he said, recognizing the blue-skinned warriors. Among others, the largest dragon agreed. "Your people knew that some species would become aggressive as they developed. They built the guardian systems to protect the garden worlds, but many guardians have been killed or captured over the millennia." High Patriarch Morgak had climbed down from his seat and was approaching the crystal device with obvious fascination. His old eyes were wide with wonder. "This technology is beyond anything we have ever seen. If humans truly created this, then we have made a terrible mistake." "Not just humans," Kathira said, looking up from her scrolls. "The texts speak of a great alliance. Dragons, humans, and dozens of other species working together. They called themselves the Covenant of Stars." War Chief Gultak struggled to his feet, still cradling his burned hands. "Even if this is all true, it changes nothing. The human is still our prisoner. His ship invaded our territory." The largest dragon turned one head toward Gultak. "The territory you claim was never yours, Vorthak. It was placed under our protection by the Covenant 60 million years ago. You have been trespassing. That's impossible. We have controlled these systems for 5,000 years. 5,000 years is nothing compared to 60 million, the dragon said calmly. But the makers were patient. They knew their children would return when they were ready. The crystal device pulsed brighter. New images appeared, showing star maps with thousands of marked locations. Some pulsed with green light, others with red, and many were simply dark. A galactic network, Teho breathed. You're showing me a map of all the Guardian sites. Green indicates sites that are still active and protected, the three-headed dragon explained. Red shows sites under attack or recently fallen. Dark sites have been silent for centuries. Teho studied the map with growing alarm. More than half the sites were red or dark. Only a few scattered locations still showed green. We're losing, he said. The Guardians have been fighting alone for too long, the youngest dragon agreed. They need the Maker's children to return and help coordinate the defense of the garden, worlds. But I'm just one person, how can I possibly help with something this big? The largest dragon smiled, an expression that looked strange but oddly comforting on its reptilian features. You are not alone, child of the Starwalkers. There are others like you scattered across many worlds. The network can reach them all. Hi, Patriarch Morgak had been listening to everything with growing amazement. Now he stepped forward and spoke in a formal tone. Commander Teho of Earth, I offer the formal apologies of the Vorthak Empire. We did not know who you truly were. Teho looked at the old alien with surprise. You believe all this? The evidence is overwhelming, Morgak replied. And more importantly, the Drakmar have never been wrong about anything important. If they say you are the child of gods, then it must be true. Not gods, Teho corrected. Just people who learned to work together and achieved great things. War Chief Gultak snarled in frustration. You cannot expect me to bow down to this soft creature just because of some light show and dragon tricks. The crystal device pulsed again. This time the images showed something that made everyone in the arena gasp. Ships were approaching Kronar. Prime from deep space, lots of ships, and they were not Vorthak vessels. The message has gone out, the largest dragon said with satisfaction. Help is coming. The approaching fleet filled the viewing screens that had appeared around the crystal device. Teho counted at least 50 ships of different designs. Some looked like modified human vessels. Others were completely alien. All of them were heading straight for Kronar Prime. Who are they? High Patriarch Morgak asked, his old voice tight with concern. The largest dragon lifted several heads to study the images. Some are human, from worlds that received our call. Others are species that still remember the old alliances, and a few are guardians like us who have learned to travel between stars. Teho focused on the lead ship, a massive vessel that seemed familiar. As the image grew clearer, he could make out Earth Defense Force markings on its hull. That's the EDF Aurora, he said with excitement. Admiral Kim So-young commands that ship. You know this person? The three-headed dragon asked. She trained me at the academy, one of the best military minds Earth has ever produced. Teho felt hope growing in his chest. If Admiral Kim was coming, she would bring help and answers. War Chief Gultak was pacing around the arena like a caged animal. This is an invasion. I should alert our defense forces. With what? Morgak asked pointedly. Most of our fleet is scattered across the Empire on patrol. We have maybe 10 ships in this system, against 50 or more approaching vessels. The crystal device pulsed again. This time a voice came from it, speaking perfect English with a slight Korean accent that Teho recognized immediately. Kronar, Prime Control. This is Admiral Kim So-young of the Earth Defense Force. We are responding to an emergency beacon from Commander Lee Teho. We request immediate permission to approach the planet. Teho stepped closer to the device. How do I respond? Just speak, the youngest dragon said. The array will transmit your words across space instantaneously. Admiral Kim, this is Commander Teho. I'm alive and safe. The situation here is complicated, but I'm being treated well now. You should know that we've discovered something incredible about human origins. There was a pause before Admiral Kim's voice came back, filled with relief. Thank God you're alive, Commander. We picked up your distress signal and came as fast as we could. What's this about human origins? Tejo looked around the arena at the dragons, the glowing symbols, and the crystal technology. It's going to sound crazy, Admiral, but we're not. Originally from Earth, we're descendants of an ancient spacefaring civilization that seeded life across the galaxy millions of years ago. Another pause, longer this time. Commander, are you under duress? Is someone forcing you to say these things? The largest dragon lowered one head near the crystal array. When it spoke, its voice was transmitted along with Tejo's words. Admiral, Kim So Young of Earth, I am the guardian called Baekho by your commander. What he tells you is truth. Your people are the children of the Starwalkers, returning to claim their inheritance. The silence that followed lasted so long that Tejo began to worry the communication had been cut off. Finally, Admiral Kim's voice returned, much quieter than before. Did that dragon just speak to me in Korean? Yes, Admiral, and there's more, much more. The galaxy is not the peaceful place we thought it was. There are garden worlds under attack, guardian sites going dark, and an ancient network that needs human help to coordinate its defense. Commander, I'm going to need a full briefing. Can you arrange safe transport to orbit? High Patriarch Morgak stepped forward and spoke toward the crystal array. Admiral Kim, this is High Patriarch Morgak of the Vorthak Empire. Commander Tejo is under our protection and will be transported to your ship immediately. We also request formal diplomatic talks to discuss this new situation. Understood, Patriarch Morgak. We're prepared to receive both Commander Tejo and a diplomatic mission. The crystal device showed new images as the conversation continued. More ships were arriving in the system, not just human vessels, but craft from species Tejo had never seen before. Some looked like they had been grown rather than built. Others seemed to be made from living crystal similar to the dragon scales. The word is spreading, the three-headed dragon said with satisfaction. Species that still remember the old alliances are answering the call. The Covenant of Stars may rise again. War Chief Gultak had been growing more agitated as he listened to the communications. You cannot simply give away Vorthak's sovereignty to these outsiders, he snarled at Morgak. The Empire will not stand for this. The Empire will adapt or fall, Morgak replied calmly. We have learned that we are not the masters of the galaxy we thought we were. It is time for wisdom instead of conquest. Gultak pulled out a small communication device and began speaking rapidly in the ancient Vorthak language. Tejo could not understand the words, but the dragon's expressions grew concerned. He is calling the war fleets, Baekho warned. Some of your people will not accept these revelations peacefully, Patriarch. Morgak closed his eyes in pain. I feared this would happen. Gultak has many followers among the younger warriors. They have known only conquest and will see cooperation as weakness. How long before the war fleets arrive? Tejo asked. The youngest dragon studied something only it could see. The nearest battle group is 2 days away, but there are smaller patrol vessels that could reach us sooner. Admiral Kim's voice came through the array again. Commander Tejo, our sensors are detecting increased military activity throughout the system. Are we about to have a problem? Possibly, Admiral. Some of the Vorthak military don't want to accept the new situation. You should prepare for potential hostilities. Understood. All ships are going to combat readiness. Commander, we're sending a shuttle to collect you now. The crystal device showed a small human transport leaving the EDF Aurora and heading for the planet's surface. At the same time, Vorthak military vessels were changing course to intercept the approaching human fleet. This is going to get messy, Tejo said. Baekho spread its massive wings. Then it is time for us to leave this place. The other guardians on this world are ready to act. All of them. 43 dragons have been prisoners here for too long, the three-headed dragon said with grim satisfaction. We are eager to see the sky again. The arena began to shake as something enormous moved beneath the ground. More cracks appeared in the walls and ceiling. Ancient systems that had been dormant for millions of years were coming back to life all across Kronar Prime. What's happening? Morgak asked, gripping his seat as the tremors grew stronger. The Guardian site is fully awakening, the youngest dragon explained. It was built to protect this region of space, but it has been sleeping since the Vorthak claimed this world. Now it remembers its purpose. Light began streaming up from deep underground. The arena floor cracked and split as something massive pushed up from below. A structure made of the same crystal material as the communication array rose into view, but this one was much larger. It looked like a tower that could reach into space. A planetary defense system, Taeho breathed. You built a fortress under their ceremonial arena. Your ancestors were thorough, Baekho agreed. They knew that important worlds would need extra protection. The crystal tower continued to rise, carrying the arena floor with it. Soon they were hundreds of meters above the ground, with a perfect view of the space battle beginning in orbit. Human and alien ships were maneuvering around each other, but no one had opened fire yet. High Patriarch Morgak stood at the edge of the platform, looking down at his capital city with amazement. In one day, everything I thought I knew about. The universe has changed. Change can be difficult, Taeho agreed, but sometimes it's necessary for growth. The old Vorthak leader nodded slowly. Perhaps it is time for my people to learn new ways. War Chief Gultak was still trying to use his communicator, but the device was no longer working. The crystal tower was interfering with normal electronics. You have doomed us all, he shouted at Taeho. The Empire will never accept this. Then maybe it's time for a new kind of empire, Taeho replied. One based on cooperation instead of conquest. The dragons began to sing again as more of their kind emerged from hiding places around the planet. Soon the sky was filled with magnificent creatures that had not flown free for 1,000 years. The real test was just beginning. The space battle that everyone expected never happened. As the Vorthak war vessels moved to attack positions, the 43 dragons of Kronar Prime rose into the sky and kept climbing until they reached orbit. The sight of so many massive creatures flying through space without ships shocked both fleets into stillness. Taeho watched from the crystal tower as Admiral Kim's shuttle landed on the platform. The EDF Marines who emerged looked ready for trouble, but they lowered their weapons when they saw him standing calmly with High Patriarch Morgak and the dragons. Admiral Kim herself was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had trained Taeho at the academy, and he had always respected her tactical mind. Now she looked around the crystal platform with obvious amazement. Commander, Taeho, she said formally, you look well for someone who was reported killed in action. Good to see you too, Admiral, Taeho replied with a tired smile. Thank you for coming so quickly. We couldn't leave one of our own behind. Kim's eyes moved to study the dragons and the glowing tower. Though I have to admit, this is not what I expected to find. Baekho lowered one of its 7 heads toward the Admiral. Welcome, Admiral Kim So Young. I am the guardian you humans call Baekho. We have much to discuss about the future of your species. Kim managed to keep her composure. Though Taeho could see the shock in her eyes, a dragon just spoke to me in perfect Korean. They're remarkably intelligent, Taeho said, and they have been waiting 60 million years for humans to find them again. 60 million years, Kim repeated slowly. Commander, do you realize how incredible that sounds? The crystal array pulsed and new images appeared showing the approaching Vorthak war fleet. At least 30 heavy cruisers were entering the system, with War Chief Gultak's personal flagship leading them. Admiral, the communication array crackled with an incoming transmission. This is Fleet Commander Raksak of the Vorthak Imperial Navy. You are in violation of our territorial space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. Admiral Kim stepped toward the array. Fleet Commander Raksak, this is Admiral Kim of the Earth Defense Force. We are here on a diplomatic mission. At the invitation of High Patriarch Morgak, Morgak is no longer in command. Raksak's voice came back. The Council of War Chiefs has voted him unfit to lead. I speak for the true Vorthak Empire now. High Patriarch Morgak sighed deeply. A coup. I should have expected this. Many of our leaders cannot accept that we are not the supreme power in the galaxy. What can we do? Taeho asked. We show them the truth, Baekho said simply. The hard way if necessary. The dragon spread its massive wings and launched itself from the platform. Its companions followed, along with dozens more dragons that had been hidden across the planet. They formed a protective formation around the human fleet, just as the Vorthak attack began. The battle was unlike anything Taeho had ever seen. The dragons did not breathe fire as he had expected. Instead, they seemed to bend space itself around them. Vorthak energy weapons passed harmlessly through areas where the dragons flew, as if the beams were being redirected somewhere else. They're manipulating gravity and energy fields, Admiral Kim said in amazement, watching her tactical displays. Our sensors can barely track what they're doing. The youngest dragon's voice came through the crystal array. We do not wish to destroy, only to protect. The Vorthak ships are being disabled, not destroyed. It was true. As Taeho watched, the attacking vessels began to lose power and drift helplessly in space. Their weapons stopped firing. Their engines went dead, but their life support systems remained active. Impossible! War Chief Gultak snarled from beside the communication array. No force in the galaxy can defeat the Vorthak fleet so easily. The dragons are not using force, Kathira said quietly. She had been studying her ancient scrolls throughout the battle. They are using the same power that built the crystal technology. They're working with the fundamental forces of the universe, instead of fighting against them. More ships were arriving in the system. These were not human or Vorthak vessels, but craft from species that Taeho had never seen before. Some looked like they had been grown from coral. Others appeared to be made of pure light, held in geometric shapes. The old Alliance species, High Patriarch Morgak said with wonder. Races that joined the Covenant of Stars millions of years ago, they still remember. The crystal array began receiving dozens of communications in different languages. The translation system worked to convert them all into words that everyone could understand. Greetings, children of the Star Walkers. The Crystalline Collective offers aid. The Void Swimmers have heard the call. We bring knowledge of the deep paths between stars. Tree Singer fleets approach with songs of growth and healing for wounded worlds. Admiral Kim was trying to process everything she was seeing. How many species are part of this ancient alliance? Originally, there were over 200 member races, the three-headed dragon explained. Many have been lost to time and war, but perhaps 50 still remember the old bonds. And they're all coming here? Not all, Baekho said. But enough to begin rebuilding the network. The garden worlds need protection, and that will require cooperation between many species. War Chief Gultak had been growing more desperate as he watched his fleet being neutralized. Now he pulled out a hidden weapon and pointed it at Taeho. This ends now. If I kill the human, the dragons will lose their focus. Before anyone could react, the weapon melted in Gultak's hands, just as his previous one had. But this time, it was not dragon fire that destroyed it. High Patriarch Morgak stood behind him with an ancient energy staff that glowed with crystal light. Enough, old friend, Morgak said sadly. You have served the Empire well, but you cannot serve it by starting a war we cannot win. Gultak stared at his burned hands in shock. You side with aliens against your own people? I side with wisdom against foolishness, Morgak replied. The Vorthak Empire can be part of something greater, or it can cling to the past and be destroyed. I choose the future. The space battle was ending as the last Vorthak ships lost power and drifted to a stop. Not a single vessel had been destroyed, but the entire fleet was helpless. The dragons began herding the disabled ships into stable orbits where rescue vessels could reach them. Commander Taeho, Admiral Kim said, I need a full report on everything that's happened here. This is going to change everything about how humanity sees itself. It's bigger than just humanity, Admiral, Taeho replied. The entire galaxy is about to change. We're going to need to think in terms of cooperation instead of competition. The crystal array pulsed with a new transmission. This one came from Earth itself. Admiral Kim, this is President Chen of the United Earth Government. We've been monitoring your communications. Is it true that we've made contact with our ancestral civilization? Not exactly, Mr. President, Kim replied. We've made contact with the Guardians they left behind. The actual Starwalkers departed millions of years ago, but they left instructions and technology to help us when we were ready. And are we ready? Tahoe stepped forward to answer. We have to be, sir. There are threats in the galaxy that the Guardians can't handle alone. They need human help to coordinate the defense of the Garden worlds. What kind of threats? The images on the crystal array changed to show scenes of destruction from across the galaxy. Worlds burning under attack from dark ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Space stations torn apart by weapons that could crack planets. Entire star systems going dark for unknown reasons. We call them the Devourers, Beckho explained. They appeared in the galaxy long after the Starwalkers departed. They consume everything they encounter, turning matter and energy into more of themselves. They are spreading slowly but steadily across the outer rim. How long do we have? President Chen asked. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the inner garden worlds in perhaps 50 of your years, the youngest dragon replied, unless something stops them. And you think humanity can help stop them? Not humanity alone, Tahoe said, but humans working with dragons and all the other Alliance species. Together, we might be able to rebuild the defenses that once protected the galaxy. High Patriarch Morgak stepped forward. The Vorthak Empire offers its full support to this new alliance. We have made mistakes in the past, but we can learn from them. War Chief Gultak laughed bitterly. You offer to serve aliens and call it wisdom? The Empire will never accept this. Then the Empire will change, Morgak said firmly. Or it will be replaced by something better. Over the next several hours, more ships continued to arrive in the Kronar Prime system. Representatives from dozens of species came to meet with the human delegation and the awakened dragons. The Crystal Tower became a gathering place for beings that had not worked together for millions of years. Tahoe found himself in the middle of it all, serving as a translator between human thinking and the ancient knowledge of the dragons. It was overwhelming but also exhilarating. For the first time since his capture, he felt like he was part of something important. What happens next? He asked Beckho during a quiet moment. Now the real work begins, the dragon replied. We must rebuild the communication network between Guardian sites. We must wake the sleeping.